Greetings, fellow truth seekers of the unexplained. Welcome to Paranormal M, your portal to the mysterious and the inexplicable. Subscribe and turn on notifications to embark on a journey into the realms beyond comprehension. We hope you're ready for a mind-bending experience. The disappearance of a Marine sergeant on Marambaia Island. I'm a former Brazilian Marine, 8 years of active duty, and I'd like to report a well-known story among the Marines about the disappearance of a sergeant on an island where we usually conduct military training. This island is known as Ilha da Marambaia. This island, that during the time when Brazil was still an empire, was a refuge of slaves who fled the farms, and they would gather in communities in the most isolated parts of the island. These people are known as quilombolas, and to this day, they still survive on the island through hunting and fishing. At one of these military trainings that takes place every year, a newly graduated sergeant, I don't know his name, but let's call him Ricardo to make it easier to tell the story. Thanks. They made friends with one of the quilombolas who lived there in the region, which is very rare to happen, as we're advised to avoid any contact with them, as they're known to be hostile to military men. During some conversations with the quilombola, he told Sergeant Ricardo about an ancient story of an old treasure hidden inside a cave in one of the isolated areas of the island. This old treasure that was hidden there by a group of thieves who was shipwrecked on the island many years ago during the time when Brazil was still an empire. However, he told Sergeant Ricardo that he should not enter the cave because any quilombola that had already entered into it never returned again. So it was known to be inhabited by a spirit who protected the treasure from outsiders. Ricardo was skeptical, didn't believe much in spirits, so he asked for the quilombola to show him where the cave was. The same refused to show the cave entrance because he said that it was very dangerous. Ricardo then did not insist and decided to forget that story and just focus on the military training. Years passed, and Ricardo didn't forget the story of the treasure on the island. He was thinking about how his life would change if he managed to find that treasure. The life of a Marine in Brazil was very rough, and the salary was very low. So he dreamed of getting out of the Marine Corps one day and starting his own business, and that treasure could help him with that. Knowing this, he decided that the next time he went to attend a military training on the Marambaia Island, he would insist that the quilombola show him where the cave entrance is, even if for that he had to offer him money to show him the way. So after a few months, Sergeant Ricardo became aware that he would be chosen to be part of the next training on the island. So that would be his chance to change his life, and he would not let that escape. Arriving on the island, he attended the usual training drills and waited until the day off, which was one of the days when there would be no training, and he would have more time to explore the cave. He waited for dawn to go to the quilombola's place without anyone from his squad seeing him, since the exploration of the island by military was prohibited by the officers. As there have been cases of military disappearing in previous training, and then he asked one of the quilombolas to show him the way to the cave. Before he went to the quilombola, Ricardo invited a close friend to go with him to help him find the treasure. This close friend is the person who spread the story that you're reading now, and said that if they found the treasure, he would share the treasure with him. The sergeant's friend refused to go because he said it was very dangerous and advised him not to go there either. He ignored his friend's advice and decided to go, just go like there's no other way but there. After finding one of the quilombolas and insisting that it showed him the way, he agreed, took Ricardo to the entrance of the cave. This is where the sergeant entered in search of the treasure that could change his life. The next day, the sergeant's friend noticed that he had not returned from his search in the cave, told the officers what had happened. Search teams were requested, and it took about a week to find the entrance to the cave where the sergeant entered. After conducting searches inside the cave, they found the sergeant dead. Just his body. Probably he was lost inside and couldn't find the exit, or perhaps was even bitten by a snake. Heavy rain on that island is very common, and normally snakes take refuge inside the caves. It is said that the Marine Corps just compensated the sergeant's family and hid the case from the public so that it didn't appear in the newspapers. I don't know if that really happened or not, but it's a very common story in the Marine Corps that's often told by older Marines. It's said that this story happened in the early 1990s, so I think at the time it wasn't very difficult to hide this kind of story from the media. I think I dated a girl who was possessed by a spirit. A few years ago, I got home from work. I decided to look for some girl on Tinder to go out in the night with. It was 7 p.m. on Friday. So I matched with the girl who was mentioning things related to smoking weed in the profile description. So I decided to start a conversation with her about that. After a few minutes talking, she told me that she really liked to smoke weed that day, and that she was pretty much without any of it. As she lived near to my neighborhood, I decided to call her out that night to eat something, drink some beers, and later smoke some weed in my car. She accepted, and sent me her WhatsApp number and the location where she was. It was like 3 kilometers away from my home. So I took a shower, changed my clothes, got in the car, put her location on the GPS and went toward her. It took a while to find her on the streets, but after a few attempts, I found her talking to a friend on the sidewalk. I honked. She recognized me and then entered the car. After she got in the car, I tried to start a conversation with her, and strangely, she didn't say anything at all. I was basically talking alone all the time. She rarely said, "Okay," and sometimes agreed, shaking her head, and that was it. At the moment, I thought, well, she must be shy. No problem. I took her to a snack bar. I tried to talk with her while we were eating, and she didn't say anything. She just ate and nothing more. Then I finally gave up and stopped talking also. So after eating some snacks and drinking some beers, in absolute silence, mind you, I invited her to smoke a joint in my car. She said, "Okay," and went to a deserted street where I parked my car. After that, I sat with her in the back seat and we smoked together, and I thought, I hope this will make her get more relaxed and maybe she'll start talking a bit. After some puffs, she looked more relaxed but still quiet. We eventually kissed each other and we had sex in the car. The weird part is, while we were having sex, she started behaving really weird and started scaring me a bit. Like looking me directly in the eyes with a weird, angry expression, as if she was not the same person anymore. When that happened, I just thought she was high or something and didn't care much, because I guess I was also high. Then after that, I just left her at the same point where I found her. I think her house was on that street, and after that, I'd gone home to my house. The next day when I was sober, I was thinking about her facial expression while we were in the car and found it all that very strange. She grabbed my head with both hands and was staring me in the eyes with a bizarre expression of anger. Her eyes were really wide open and her mouth was like she was kind of smiling. Anyway, I decided to follow her on social media, Instagram and Facebook, to know more about her. and most of her posts were really random and weird stuff. Like, for example, a lot of pictures of cardboard sheets with random phrases written in really bad English. Or from Brazil, and here we only speak Portuguese. Like, for example, I love, where you, heart our God, us kill him. Where will us? We continue. Each sheet full of random stuff like that. Then one day she started talking a lot about stuff in her personal life on Instagram stories. That she had a baby that she loved, that she was enjoying to again be an Umbanda. This is an African religion that is quite common here in Brazil. She was happy to be talking again with her grandmother who was already dead. And then she talked something that made me understand everything that happened that night in my car. She said that whenever she was high, she got possessed by a spirit of her grandma, and that she really enjoys that. So I connected the dots and I realized that she probably was under the influence of her grandma that night when I met her. After that, she started posting pictures of her face on Instagram that looked really scary, like if she was possessed by a spirit or something. In one of the pictures, her jaw was really wide open as if it was broken, and her eyes were all white. It sent chills down my spine when I saw that. Well, after seeing all that stuff, I just decided to unfollow her on all social media and blocked her number so she can't contact me anymore. I'm not sure if she's just inventing all that stuff, but to be honest, I'm not really interested to contact her again and find out the truth. Well, that story was bizarre, and, well, it was bizarre on too many levels for me. On to the next one. Country club when I was young. I was maybe 10 or 11. My dad ran a bar in a country club. And from day one, I never liked being there, especially at night. I would always bring my Xbox to keep myself occupied, and the way the bar worked was you had the main area where the bar was, and through a little hallway was the bathrooms, and those led to another room that my dad put arcade games in. It wasn't used very often, but I think it's because nobody really knew about it. Through another door was a little room where I would play my Xbox, and then behind that room was my dad's office. Outside, where the employees usually parked, there was a small loading dock and a gate that led to a bunch of old pools that were shut down a long time ago, even then. And one day I saw what I thought was a person. When I first saw it, it was wearing a black hood and moved very quickly away from me inside the defunct pool area. But when I really looked at it, I saw that it didn't have legs, or what legs are supposed to look like. They looked like a blur of legs, and I saw it dip around a corner. So being the curious kid that I was, I went looking around to see if I could see who or what it was, and never saw it again. Another time I was just wandering around after getting bored playing games, and I heard a piano playing in the ballroom. That was just outside the bar in the pro shop. So I went to look, and no one was there. But there were imprints in the stool like someone was sitting there. And I've had multiple dreams even spanning into my adult life about being in there while the piano's playing. Nobody's there, but the piano is still playing. One night when I had the dream again, I was grown and walked into the ballroom and I heard the piano yet again. But I saw a small kid standing with his back turned on the stage. Then everything went black. I've also had multiple times where in the back rooms I would hear voices and doors opening, but no one would be there. There were a couple of rooms that were just off the kitchen, and I had only been in them once, but the power was shut off in those rooms. I guess because they weren't used as they were like locker rooms for the pools. I walked in one night because I thought I heard someone in there. I get in maybe 3 steps, and I hear a very loud crash. I turned and ran the other way. The last thing I'll tell you about is one night when my dad had to close up. I was sitting in the lobby just off the ballroom, and I saw someone just outside the door pacing around. It looked like a full person, legs, arms, eyes, mouth, expressions on his face. So thinking it was a patron of the bar, I brushed it off and looked away. When I looked back up, the guy's literally disappearing in front of me. I saw his upper half just fading away like Marty McFly in Back to the Future. I was so scared by it, I ran to my dad crying for the life of me, and I couldn't tell him what was wrong. I was pretty much just that level of inconsolable. The place never sat right with me, and I learned later that one of my friends snuck in there while it was closed years later. They saw the exact same apparition I saw the first time that was running. She also heard the piano playing in the ballroom and saw what looked like bloodstains in one of the rooms just off the kitchen. From what I was told, there was a guy that took his daughter hostage because his wife was filing for divorce, and he killed her. But then himself, and apparently there were other deaths, but I don't know anything about them. I think I saw my deceased son, and it makes me emotional. Months ago, before moving to a new home, I began to wake up during the night and feel as if I was being watched. My wife miscarried our first kid. He was my first son, and I was shattered when it happened. Well, one night I woke up, not really sure what time it was. My wife was asleep and all the kids were sleeping. I check on them periodically. But being a father, I like to know my kids are safe and sleeping peacefully. I know my son was in the living room, he gets nightmares, and I'll run in there and assure him that I'm there. However, the night I woke up, I faced the wall but felt this presence. I felt like I was being watched. I sit up instinctively and see the silhouette of what I thought was my son standing in the doorway. "Hey buddy, you okay? Have a nightmare?" No answer, but I saw the blonde hair and a smile and what dim lights came from the television that was in the living room. I began to get out of bed, and what I thought was my son dove around the doorframe. I walk out of my room and see my son sound asleep. "Buddy?" My heart starts racing now as I approached my son, checked to make sure he sound asleep and not trying to fool me. Undoubtedly asleep, and I had no other sons then. I began to look around the house, but the image of my son in the doorway kept replaying in my head. What if it was my deceased son? Was he always watching? Nothing like this has happened since, but I can't shake the possibility that if it was him, it felt so broken. A connection? But when I told my mom about when I saw the little boy walk out of my sister's bedroom into my parents' room, she told me a story about a neighbor that lives a house down from us. She had told me that the lady's son had killed himself. I'm not sure why, but many people have said that he walks around in the streets and just stands in a spot. I haven't seen him, nor do I want to. Not only has my mom told that story, but my friend's mom has also seen that man in the streets. She told me that when her son was younger, my friend's little brother, they were outside talking to a family member and it was 7 or 8 p.m. Not sure the son was playing really, but while the mom was talking, but all of a sudden the son kept nagging his mom about a guy. The mom ignored the son, thinking he was just seeing a guy walking. It's normal in our neighborhood, but the little boy kept nagging and he kept saying, "Look at the guy standing. So she finally took a look, and a guy in the distance is just standing there. See, look, I'm not sure if she saw his face or anything. She didn't really specify, but she went back to talking to the family member, and when she looked back up, the guy was gone. By the way, I'm not sure if I'm missing some stuff. She told this story a long time ago. This is what I remember about this story. And when I said that, it probably connects to the story I posted before, because it might be the guy as the little boy just looking around, because I haven't seen the little boy since. I think my house is haunted. So a few years back, I was doing online school, so I was home alone for most of the day. And this day, I was finished with my schoolwork, so I was just laying on my bed on my phone. And keep in mind, I was home alone. My dad and stepmom were at work, and my stepbrother was at school. And suddenly I started hearing these loud, heavy footsteps coming from the hallway. Also, my room's on the second floor, and it sounded like someone with heavy snow boots was slowly walking back and forth from my room to my dad's room, which was left from mine on the same side. I just completely froze and paused the video. And I just kept walking back and forth for, I guess, 2 minutes, but at the time it felt like forever. Eventually it stopped, but I didn't move as I was in shock at what I just heard. My initial thought was someone was in the house, but I never heard anybody walking up the stairs. And by the way, the stairs and the upstairs is covered in wood. But after a minute of me listening to see if I would hear anything, I got up to see what it was. So I opened my door, checked around the corner, no one was there. I went to the bathroom window, which looks out over the front yard and driveway, to see if I could see any cars, but there were none. So I just went back to my room and locked the door. Around the same time that happened, I don't remember if it was before or after that incident happened, but one time, also home alone, I was laying on my bed on the side, and I heard a voice in my right ear. Now, you could say that it was my brain just being loud, and I would agree with you, but I can't explain the hot breath I felt on my ear when it talked. And it was so close to my ear it sounded like it was yelling, but I know it was whispering. I can't remember what it said, but I know it was just one word. And that was the only time that ever happened. Fast forward a few months, nothing strange like that happened for a while, so I mainly forgot about it. And one night I was going to go downstairs to get some water, and for some reason I always peek around the corner to see in the living room just to see if anyone is there. I get quite paranoid at night. So I walked down the stairs and started to peek into the dark living room, expecting nothing, when I saw this shadow figure sitting on the couch. The only thing I could make out was the head shape and its shoulders, but past that it was just a dark mass. I froze and just stared at it. It didn't even move, just sat there in the dark. After a minute of staring at it, I audibly said, "Nope," and went back upstairs and locked my door. I still peek around the corner at night waiting for it to be back, but it never is. My ghost story. When I was 5, my family moved houses. It was a big deal for us to move from the old cramped house to one that could fit our growing family. The farm near our development had been abandoned for nearly a decade at the time, and most every building had collapsed, save for 2, the old farmhouse and the barn. For sake of privacy, I'm going to refer to the farm as the WB farm. As I grew older, the farmhouse had become dilapidated, yet the barn still stood strong. The neighborhood kids always thought the place was haunted, and the older kids told stories of a woman looking through the second-story window of that house. There was no flooring in the house, as they discovered. My parents never wanted me near that place since I was dangerous, but I finally got my break when my friend's dog got loose. We searched and eventually got to the barn, which was the only structure left. The barn was massive, so the door didn't let much light spill in. We searched, but we didn't find the dog. However, we did find something else, much more disturbing. Animal bones had been left behind in a pile. Disturbed, we started to go when we heard a loud, disembodied voice telling us not to go. I don't think we had ran any faster in our lives before, never to return. And this year, everything left of the WB farm was raised, and I can't say I could have been happier to see it go. A ghostly message at the movies. This encounter happened to me in 2010 when I lived in Chicago. I went with my best bud to catch a science fiction movie at AMC River East, my favorite theater in town. It was a matinee. We sat in the balcony in the cavernous theater number 2. No one was in the balcony with us. I gave my bud some money to get some popcorn and soda. As I sat there watching those annoying pre-movie commercials, I heard the chair behind me squeak. It sounded like somebody sat down right behind me, but you'd have to enter from the side of me and be able to see you walk in. I didn't think about it too much until I felt a hand on my shoulder. When I looked at it, like, why is this person touching me? I saw red nails, a big old wedding ring, and a pearl bracelet. I heard a woman's voice say, "Pick up your phone. It's your mother. Do as she asks." I didn't really recognize the voice because it was more of a whisper, but then I felt a gentle stroking of my hair. I could smell a floral perfume. At that point, my buddy had returned. He looked at me and asked who that lady behind me was, but he couldn't describe her well because of the shadows. The theater lights started to dim and the trailer started. A few minutes later, my phone vibrated. It was my mother. My grandmother had just died unexpectedly, and I needed to go home to help with funeral arrangements. She thought I'd be the only one who could keep it together to organize it. At the funeral, my grandmother's hands were crossed, like you'd expect. She had shiny red nails, her wedding ring a pearl bracelet, and I could smell her rose perfume. It was the last thing my grandfather bought her before he passed, too. Appalachian Horror. I figure the best way to start this is by stating that this is a series of events that I've experienced throughout my 27 years of living in the Appalachian region of rural Southwest Virginia. Some have just been feelings, while others have left me unable to be outside after dark, which, as many of you may know, is something that you never do when you live as deep in the mountains as I do. Firstly, I will go back as far as I can remember to when we had just started living in the house that we still currently live in. In the grand scheme of things, our house really isn't all that old. If I remember, it was built somewhere around the 60s or 70s, so really not that old. When my grandparents bought the house and we moved in, that was when experiences were starting to happen. They weren't bad experiences, don't get me wrong. Mainly, things are being moved, shadows out of the corner of my eye, strange smells and sounds. But nothing I would call bad, just strange. My mother and father had moved a trailer onto my grandparents' property at that time as well. And my mother, unlike my granny and myself, is very much a skeptic. I vaguely remember her always brushing off Granny, telling me about strange smells and other things happening around the house. Until one day she was by herself at the trailer. My brother and I were at school, Granny was at work, and my pawpaw was most likely in his recliner at the house. Something to know about where the trailer sat at the time and the land that we own. We own a small few acres of land with a creek running about halfway through it, splitting the land that we lived and worked on from the land that was almost entirely mountainside. The trailer was sat at the very edge of the property by the creek. There was about half an acre of land between the house and the trailer, and my mother, who was home alone, started smelling a man's aftershave. Could potentially mark that up to my father, except my father didn't wear anything like that when he was alive. Not that he didn't like it, that stuff just never smelled good on him. Granny always said that smell good always rotted on your daddy, even as a baby. So it wasn't my father. My pawpaw was in the house at the end, and that was at the end of the property. She couldn't figure out where this clove-like smell was coming from. Things went on like that for a long time. Objects being moved, the smell of a man's aftershave, all of it. Finally, I don't know what prompted it, my grandparents decided to get the house wiring checked out. Turns out that house had been wired with the same kind of wires that were used in coal mines on the lot. If not, most of the wires were bad. Strangely, once the wiring was fixed, all the strange happenings in the house and property stopped. Granny still says to this day that the previous owner was looking out for us. Now we're going to skip forward a few years now. By this time, my mother's divorced my father, given up custody of me and my brother to her grandparents. I'm still at the age where playing outside in the dirt and creek is the most fun a southern child can have. And I've made myself a little place across the creek and a little thicket to play in. It was a good, quiet place for a child to play. And it was good for a while. There's always a feeling that comes with being watched. Different feelings to being watched, and this feeling I got, even as a child, was not a welcoming nor friendly sort of watching. I never found out what it was, nor have I gotten back to that little spot I used to play in. Even approaching the area I used to play in gives me such a sense of dread and apprehension that I've never been able to shake it. A few years later, and my younger brother and I are living with my mother. We lived there with her new husband. A mistake now that I look back on it, but that's not a post for here. I wanted to decorate my new room, so we went to the local flea market where I bought a clock and a painting to hang up in my room. Now, before these items entered the house, it was just a normal house. Afterwards, doors opening on their own, items being moved, my cat refusing to leave my side, my things gone missing only to show up in other rooms, sleep paralysis, a tall, dark shadow moving in the corner of my eye, and voices. It was awful, and a time in my life I never want to revisit. I distinctly remember laying in my bed with my cat. My light was on and I had my CD player blaring music. The usual teen things. When out of nowhere it felt like something kicked the edge of my bed. And I'm not talking a light kick like somebody trying to get my attention. I'm talking hard enough to scoot my bed several inches to the side. There were nights where I'd be laying in bed and my door cracked because of course I had the room with no windows. And I've always had a slight fear of pitch black. I'd be laying there on my side, so my face was facing the door. Now, something to know about me is that I have awful vision. Without my glasses, I can only see clearly a few inches in front of my own face. This doesn't mean, however, that I can't see movement. I believe that it's far more terrifying to only be able to see a dark blur moving towards you than to clearly see what that blur is. We didn't stay long in that house. was forced to move not long after, and during the move I was forced to leave the clock behind. And oddly enough, the strange happenings stopped. Now we skip a bit forward in time. I'm an adult now and have had more experiences now that I'm back in my hometown in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. Everything from hearing a woman outside in the middle of the night in January saying, "Hello," over and over being outside at night smoking and getting the overwhelming feeling that if I didn't get inside immediately, that something would attack me. All the way to the crickets outside going quiet, and the fear of turning around to look out the window for fear of what may be looking in. Hotel ghost experience. Turned skeptic to believer. So this is an experience I had in 2018 when I was management trainee with an organization, and it entailed a short 1 or 2 week stint across their major offices in different cities. Our office organized for accommodation for us too. For my second stint, I was put in a city where I'd never been before and had no friends or acquaintances. So the company booked a hotel close to the office premises. The room was rather big and seemed very luxurious, albeit a bit old and shabby. What stumped me the most was how economical it was. The first night was uneventful, and for a woman traveling alone for the first time, it felt secure and comfortable. The second night, at about 9:30 p.m., I ordered in, and after finishing my dinner, I went out to my door to place the food trolley for collection by the staff. Just when I turned around to close my door, I saw someone staring at me from the corner of my eye. The person was at the end of the corridor, and it was very dimly lit. And let me add here that only 2 out of the 20 rooms on the floor were occupied, and 10 were being renovated, hence the dim lighting at night. When I turned to look, the person ran out of view toward the elevator. I was creeped out and, I just locked the room and reported this to the reception. Third night. I was talking to my mom on a video call. I heard heavy pacing and running at about 10 or 10:30 p.m. My mom heard it too. I sneaked to the peephole and I saw no one, but I heard the footsteps right outside my door. I called the reception and they sent someone to check, who reported that there was no one, and I checked their CCTV footage. No one was there. Fourth night. I got a call on the hotel intercom, and when I answered, I heard only heavy breathing and low growling noises. This continued another 2 times before I called the reception again to raise a complaint. They checked their call panel records and said I had not received any from any current hotel guest or staff lines. I checked again next morning just to be sure, and they showed me how the system is automated and no one can tamper with it. It showed no incoming or outgoing calls from my room. Fifth night. Heard a constant knocking on the wall behind the bed. Moved across the room. Basis where I was standing, and this creeped me out much more, and as someone diagnosed with hyperanxiety and depression, felt like I was losing my mind, and I got an anxiety attack. I ran out of my room to the reception 2 floors below, and the manager on duty just calmed me down, and I was extremely upset. I questioned everyone around, and none of the staff said anything, and said it was strange as such things were happening. Later, a woman from my hometown who was currently employed there accompanied me to a new room that they assigned me to. She told me in private that the floor I was on was sealed for 5 years and had recently been opened. Rumor has it that some old hotel staff had molested a woman and she was killed in the struggle. The administration covered it up and paid off the perpetrator and the family of the victim and sold the property to the current owners. Since then, people have reported multiple occurrences on that floor. Also, these were major events. Some other small things happened, like the feeling of being watched constantly, cold spots and feelings of nausea and panic. I checked out promptly the next morning, got another hotel, paid from my pocket, and have since then been extremely scared and anxious to be alone in any hotel room. Strawberry moons. On a warm day in early June of 2017, it was just a normal day. My fiancée at the time was away on military orders, so I was staying with my mom. She lived in an older farmhouse half a mile from town. I spent middle school and high school growing up there with my 3 stepsisters, half-brother, and blood sister. My 2 stepsisters were staying at the time, being the youngest was still in school, therefore visiting her dad. I started working out during the day, sometimes at night. During the day, I would go for runs behind the house there. There was a farm road between fields of corn, perfect for running and beautiful. I was looking on Facebook and read there was supposed to be a quote-unquote strawberry moon. So I snuck out into the porch where it was filled with darkness and took a picture. It was breezy but warm out that night. I decided to work out after going inside. My daughter, 9 months, was asleep on the couch in the next room. Walking into the house, there's a foyer. Straight away is the bathroom, and to the right is the kitchen. I went to the bathroom and looked in the medicine cabinet for Tylenol. Went back through the kitchen and stopped to get my phone. I looked straight ahead out of the kitchen and door and window just to see a lit-up face staring at me, looking wrinkled or burnt. It was creepily smiling. It had frizzy hair, a pale face, but rosy cheeks almost. The rest of its body I couldn't see. My mouth dropped, and its smile only widened. I ran across to the other side of the table and went to peek again to see if I was just imagining shit, or if it was just a reflection. But it didn't move an inch, still smiling at me. I ran upstairs frightened and told my stepsisters I just saw a clown outside. I don't know why I said clown, it was just the first thing to come to mind. I do believe it was paranormal. Anyway, we ended up calling the cops, just in case it was actually a person standing out there trying to scare us. My dad's experiences with skinwalkers. I have hundreds of stories from my father about paranormal encounters that he's had. He has 2 of them concerning what I believe to be skinwalkers. Both of these take place in the southeast during the late 80s or 90s. Excuse my writing, because I'm not a writer. To begin with, my dad is a Native American and spent a lot of his childhood and early childhood. The first one, my dad was walking around in the woods of a reservation with his friends. His friends were back at the car. He was walking about 50 feet away from them. He saw another native man behind a bush, but he could immediately feel something was wrong with him. The guy had on no clothing as far as he could see. No jewelry, no makeup, or anything distinguishing. His hair was pulled back into a ponytail. They held eye contact for a long time, what felt like hours. In reality, probably it was less than a minute and a half. He was temporarily frozen with fear. He called for his friends, but none came. He turned to face them. Then he looked back and the man was gone. Within seconds, noiselessly, no sign there that anyone was there at all. The second was definitely a lot closer to what most people think of when they hear about skinwalkers. My dad was out in a secluded forest when he heard a piercing scream come very close by. He described it as a mixture of a native throat cry, the ay-ay-ay-ay-ay sort of sound, mixed with that of a feral cat or a hurt bird. They brushed it off first this time. Then they heard it a second time, and it was just as close as it had been, despite them moving. They decided to get out of there. It was deafening and about 10 seconds long. It happened about 3 times as they were leaving and never once sounding any farther or closer away. Pre-birth memory / pre-birth existence, near birth experience. Alright, I've been having this memory for a long time now. Since I started remembering only small parts since 7 and kept remembering bits and pieces throughout my life, I'm going to go out and say that it's a memory that I have and it's from the other side. There I was in a void. I couldn't see anything, and I didn't have a sense of cold or heat, or even emotions like anger because I didn't have a body. I was there, floating at great speed, toying and playing around since I realized that I was an orb of light. So I was floating there happy, which is an emotion, I guess, in every direction, just messing around like a child. The other glimpse of my memory is that of me waiting in line like in a queue, like at an airport waiting for check-in type queue. And it was a while, I guess. Everything was white, and there were other orbs like me. The other memory I have is choosing my life. I don't know, it led me to want to experience life, but I really did not want to miss out since everybody else was doing it. It was kind of like FOMO. Fear of missing out. So anyway, choosing phase there begins with my male energy and female energy. Male to my right, female to my left. I was presented with thousands of different planets and worlds to live in, like literally there are so many to choose from. It was like I was presented, like on a screen. In those, I saw futuristic cities like Metropolis type, and feeling I was getting that world was that it was very advanced. In the other screen, I saw a reptilian humanoid being in a cave, or rather he just got out of the cave to view the landscape, I guess. It was night and dark blue and rocky. It was overwhelming to choose just one life, and I did sense that there was a presence to hurry up. So I was kind of recommended by beings and guides or entities to go to planet Earth. So then I was to decide which of the family and the year I wanted to incarnate to, and what life I was going to have. There were maybe 3 or 4 options to choose from. So anyway, I was kind of interested, or rather considering to choose options, but I was again recommended to choose one family over the other. Or rather, I guess, I wanted to at least incarnate into a country or city that was the most advanced. I saw glimpses of what that life would be like, and I saw that I would get to experience life in other countries. I saw what my body would look like. So anyway, the advantages of this life would be to get to experience life in other countries, and this life would be much more relaxed in comparison to other options I was considering. But there was going to be a suffering internally. Life after 20s, I guess, was going to be a struggle, and I saw that I'd get to live to my 80s or 90s. I only saw like moments or glimpses of the life that I'm living now. From the point of my orb self, I was excited for this life. I would sort of say naive. And I knew that this was not going to be easy, but it was the easiest from the other options. I also remembered telling them that I want to remember, and that there were now 3 beings discussing this, and I couldn't perceive them or didn't know what they were saying. Were there always 3, or is it because I didn't notice the 3rd one? I don't know. The male one to my right didn't communicate much. It was like professional, like he was doing his job. But female one to my left was loving or caring. I also sensed other orbs too. They were like me choosing, I guess. I should also mention that the choosing part was happening in a darkness and void area. The next memory after that is of me floating over planet Earth, and I felt like there was a pressure behind me to hurry up, and through some device or pool or tube thing I entered, or Rather was sucked magnetically, like sucked in instantly. The first feeling I got was fear. I was shot like a bullet to earth at great speed. I said to myself to remember this memory. I willed it that I want to remember. And there as I was being bulleted to earth like zooming at the speed of light. From my perspective, I wanted to stop and explore the earth as a floating orb. But I couldn't control the force. As I was approaching to the destination, I decided I was going to research everything about the planet and feel this freedom again. Then there was white light, or rather a flash, signifying that I already entered the womb, and boom, darkness again. But now it was so warm and occasionally felt like I was being fed. That was strange, as me, I don't need anything such as food, water, or air. And then after there was another memory of just everything being blue. Other memory begins of me slowly shifting from a third perspective of me perceiving my body to the first perspective. I was excited and ran to the mirror to see what I looked like, and I realized that it wasn't me and I was in a body. I was surprised that I could move my hands for the first time. So there you go. This is my memory from the other side. Don't know if I'm experiencing a ghost or not. Help. I've experienced a few weird things in my apartment the last month. I can't recall if it's happened earlier than a month ago, but pretty sure it's at least the last month. I've lived in my apartment just about a year, never felt anything before. It's either a ghost or a presence or someone is entering my apartment while I'm sleeping. Two major things that happened. 1. A few weeks ago I woke up thinking that my dog had jumped to my bed. He's a big dog, so I can feel the mattress weighing down when he lays. Usually he stays by my feet, but since I was cold, I called him to move up so I could hug him. I called out several times without response, so I eventually sat up to kind of drag him up. It sounds crueler than it was. And this was only to realize that he wasn't there. He was in his bed in the living room outside my bedroom. At the time, I was just blaming it on a dream and that I was just tired. I don't have my dog with me every day, Thursday through Sunday only. 2. This happened this morning, and I'm honestly freaked out. Last night when I was about to fall asleep, I was awoken by the sound of, imagine someone blowing out breath, a loud one into your ear. That sound. I can't recall feeling air, but I was also about to fall asleep. I just pretended again that I was dreaming and tried to fall asleep. This brings me to this morning. When I exited my apartment, I realized my door was unlocked. This has happened about 2 times before the last month, and I've blamed it on being tired. I usually check if my door is locked in the evening before I go to bed because I'm paranoid, and I'm certain that I locked it last night, which makes me believe that I did it the other 2 times as well. I've sometimes seen the lamp over my bed moving, amongst other smaller things, but blamed it on a draft or the ventilation. I don't know if ghosts or presences can move things or unlock things. Also, the previous person who rented my apartment is a bit crazy. Not just saying it, but truly, honestly. Took me months to get all of the keys, hence why I think it might have something to do with that. However, nothing is ever missing from my apartment. I was at my parents' over Christmas, which is like 5 days, and my apartment was normal when I came home. I also never saw anyone the times I woke up while sleeping. Two experiences, one of which happened to me and one that was described to me. The first one happened to me personally. About a year ago, I was in the hospital for a severe respiratory infection that wasn't COVID or the flu. I have COPD. It sent me into respiratory failure, They had placed me on a BiPAP machine to help me breathe and treated me with steroids and antibiotics. They were able to take me off the BiPAP after a few days. They then placed me on the high-flow cannula, which allowed me to talk. So it was early evening of the day and I was placed in this new device. My sister was visiting me and a nurse and a respiratory therapist were in the room doing their jobs. The bedside on my left was cluttered with monitors and the breathing machine. There had been a bedside 3-drawer nightstand there, but they had moved it and placed it by the door to make room for all the equipment that they were using. While all of this was going on, the food service orderly brought in my dinner tray. Because the area near my bed was full of machines and people, they placed the tray on the nightstand next to the door and left. I had no appetite, and it was left on the nightstand for the orderly to pick up later. So the nurse and the RT were doing their thing and I was talking to my sister, when suddenly the tray flew off the nightstand, sailed across the room and crashed into the bathroom door, sending food onto the floor and all over the door. Everyone was silent at first. Then my sister said, "I guess someone really doesn't like the food." Their nurse agreed with her and called someone from housekeeping to clean up. I was in that room for about 10 more days and nothing else happened, but that was pretty freaky. Later during the same stay in the hospital, I told a night nurse about the food tray incident, and she told me a story about something that happened to her at a small rural hospital. She said that there had been an elderly woman patient who was terminally ill and was kind of difficult. She said the lady had long fingernails painted bright red and she would scratch at the bed and clothes while she was talking to the staff. The woman ended up dying in the room, but life went on. She then told me that a few days later they had put a young girl in the room and then late one night the little girl came running up to the nurse's station, crying about somebody being in her room. She said there was an old woman with long red fingernails scratching at the pillow and telling the little girl to get out of her bed. Needless to say, there was no one in there. Bubble outline / white shadow type figures. All of my life, I've seen what I call bubble figures. They are bubble, translucent outline, or white smoke-like figures. A few months ago, I stumbled onto a post with similar experiencers labeling them as cloaked alien beings. Those that made this declaration have seen the cloaked and uncloaked versions allegedly. Before moving back to Texas in June, we lived in Alaska for 3+ years, and for the majority of that time, a figure was always consistently at the end of my bed. Moving back to Texas, I see or feel one in the doorway of my current bedroom. I don't know if it followed me or if it was something new. I don't know if this is related or not, but due to intense sleep paralysis in my teens, I always sleep with the light on and I've always had vivid dreams. My dreams in Alaska and here in the beginning were so vivid and disturbing while happening practically every single night. It would be as if I woke up exhausted every morning from a full night of various run-for-your-life scenarios. What I keep coming back to is consistency. There's always one consistently lurking in the same spot around my bedroom. Sometimes more show up, especially when I talk about them, which is why I've spent my life pretending that I don't see them. I don't know how to find answers on my own. So, are they spirits, watchers, aliens, or something else? I look forward to hearing from those with similar experiences. A little girl is, was, or has been haunting my house. The first time something weird happened, I was daughter-sitting my girl, 2 at night. I'm a single father and she slept in my bed. Usually, as kids do, they didn't sleep unless I went to bed with her. So it was like 1 or 2 a.m. We were lying in bed and I was pretending to be asleep. I had been quiet and still for at least 15 or 25 minutes, but I knew she was awake. She kept moving, and suddenly she started talking, or replying more likely. "No, you're crazy. No, you're crazy. No, you're crazy." In Spanish, the sex of the addressee is implied. She was saying, "No, tú estás loca." So she said this like 10 to 12 times before I started shaking and trembling, trying to suppress my laughter. So she felt this and put a hand on my back and said, "Don't cry, Daddy." At this moment I opened my eyes, looked at her and said, "I'm not crying, I'm laughing. Who are you talking to?" She pointed to the middle of the empty, dark room and said, "The little girl, La Niña." The room was empty and almost pitch black. You could barely see the outlines of the stuff. It's very small for a room, like a prison cell. So obviously I got scared shitless, got up, lit the room, and went to play at the PC while the baby's sitting on my lap, eventually asleep until morning. Eventually we moved out and came back some years later. At this point she's 12 or 13. She's shy and quiet and smart and didn't really live through her phone. She was and is an archaic kid, bless the heavens. We built a room in the living room, just the one wall we needed, so that way she could have some privacy. She never wanted to sleep there, and sometimes she didn't even play there. I didn't mind much, until one day I got pissed and sent her to play in her room, and the answer I got was, "I don't like playing in that room. I feel like someone's watching me. And sometimes I even think I see a little girl in the corner of my eye." I didn't pay much attention to him, just laughed and told her you should be afraid of the living, or something like that. This other time, we had a fridge box on the balcony. This was very near the quote-unquote room. Sometimes she used to play in it and even had it arranged like a clubhouse or something like that. So I get home and shout to see where she is because she didn't come to the door to say hi. She shouted from the balcony, "Dad, come." When I got there, she got out of the box, and all of this was during the day, by the way, and she told me that she'd been trapped in the box for some time, afraid to get out, because she felt a presence outside. She didn't even peek, and she told me straight up that she thought it was the little girl. People have seen it standing there in the middle of the room like washed-up Samara, the girl in the ring, this one with the white dress, the long black hair over her face, and is always looking down at her feet. She doesn't make eye contact, opposite of another thing I saw, another story, but she's usually facing the door, although I'm pretty sure I've seen her from another angle, almost like her full back. She didn't disappear unless you tried to focus her. She was not a glimpse if you just stood there watching from the corner of your eye. She was there. Nor she was a trick of the light. She showed up in the dark and you could clearly see her. And when the light was on also, I rearranged the stuff in the room. Small room, very little stuff. Nothing of that height. When I got tired of seeing her, even though I got rid of her. My daughter, 14, had to migrate to Berlin with her mother. Crying face. Fuck communism. And I dismantled that room. I'm actually halfway there, but not advancing. But I have a friend come over for Wild Rift. It's a game. Sleepovers. And one of the first times he came when he went to the bathroom, that part of the house, he told me he felt like a bad vibe or presence was coming from that area, specifically where the room used to be. My sister-in-law also dropped this on a normal conversation, like a bad vibe or presence coming from that area, specifically where the room used to be. To be honest, I don't feel her there anymore. There is something all right, nor have I seen her in a long time. That part of the house doesn't have much lighting, and I am a little scared when going there, which I do normally. But truth be told, I try not to pay attention or look too much. I'm open to questions, and if you like that story, I have a couple more. Different, not involving children, except the one I mentioned in the story. And unrelated to La Nina, but still interesting. My daughter, 12, used to love sleeping with my mom. This one time my mom told me that she had a nightmare, and when I asked her, she refused to tell me, but she did say it wasn't a nightmare. I don't want to talk about it, and I never, emphasis on never, want to sleep in that room again. Fast forward a few months, and one time I wanted to be alone in her room, probably fighting over the phone because I was mad, and I told her, in a bad manner, to go to sleep with her grandma because I wanted to be alone. Yelled at me. On the verge of tears, she said, "I'm not gonna cap all of this," but she was yelling. Sorry, the guy who's writing this story has so many parentheses. It's mind-boggling. I told you I never wanted to sleep there again. The last time something grabbed my ankle and tried to pull me under the bed. I wasn't asleep, nor did I dream it, and I got dragged, and she's skinny and little, across the bed, and my legs were dangling, rather, crescendo. Smiley face, LOL. Not sleep, exclamation mark. I'm going to the PC, and I swear the sun caught her playing Roblox, a game in parentheses. See ya.